Shoulder impingement round 2, electric boogaloo. Hey guys, Coach Michael here at Starting Strength Boston today, and we're going to be talking about the bench press, the best lift in the whole wide world. So the bench press was invented around 1957 by Mr. John Bench Press, great guy. The bench is the best lift because you get to lay down, you get to chill. It's also the least complicated of all the main lifts. Kind of the least technical. You could argue that the deadlift is the least technical because you're using the most amount of muscle mass. So in that sense, you can kind of like overcome the lack of technique with all the muscle mass. But the bench is really just like the most simple technically. So let's go over that technique today, starting with the anatomical model. Then we'll get into the mechanical model after that. All right, so the biggest thing in terms of anatomy with the bench press is we want to avoid shoulder impingement, right? So if you watched my press video, you know what that's all about. If you didn't do that, go watch that. But for those who did their homework, we're gonna get right into it, right? So in the press, we know that we shrug at the top to avoid impingement, right? That moves the scapula. The problem with the bench press is that we're pinning the scapulas together like this, right? So the scapular is pinned down on the bench. It's got nowhere to go. So the other piece of that is the head of the humerus, right? This bone right here that causes impingement. So we're gonna have to move that bad boy. And to do that, instead of coming down like this, right, this is gonna impinge the shoulder, we're gonna aim for around 70 degrees of humeral abduction like this. In layman's terms, you're gonna tuck the elbows, right? That's what they tell you online in powerlifting and stuff like that. So basically, you're just gonna come down kind of like this, tuck the elbows a tiny little bit instead of coming down like this, right? This hurts, this doesn't. Simple as that. So that's gonna have an effect on the bar path that I'm going to talk about in the mechanical section. This is still the anatomical section. And we're going to use an arch to mitigate some of that mechanical, well, we'll talk about that in a second, but basically by pinning the scapulas together like this in the bench press, right, you're creating an arch in the upper back, which is kind of lifting your chest up, making it a bit more mechanically advantageous. Anatomically, what that does is it brings your pec fibers more in line with each other, right? So you have like the pec, the kind of the lower ones and the middle ones, then you have the upper pecs, and it kind of just shifts all of them together, gets them more in line with each other, so they're all pulling at more of a 90-degree angle. And like I talked about in, I think, the deadlift video, the most efficient angle for transferring force is 90 degrees, right? So your pec tendons are all going to kind of insert at more of a 90-degree angle on the humerus, which is more advantageous to produce force. Let's talk about the mechanics of the bench press. All right, so this first part is a lot like a tiny little fish or like a shrimp or something in the belly of a striped bass, a stripa, if you will. Inefficiency. So we have an intentional inefficiency on the shoulder in the bench press. We're introducing a moment arm between the bar and the shoulder. So if you can see my little bench guy, basically when you're on your chest at the bottom of the bench right here, the bar is sitting right about here because we're tucking the elbows like we said, right? Bar sitting right about here, shoulders right about here. You got a moment arm going on right there, right? So that is necessary, like I said before, to prevent shoulder impingement, all right? But we can mitigate that by arching, like I talked about before. So if you squeeze your shoulders together, puff your chest up, get that arch in your upper back, then you don't have to bring the bar down as far, right? So the bar, instead of touching, this far away from your shoulder, it's only gonna touch here, and it's gonna be closer to your shoulder, so it's a smaller moment arm. And so the product of all that is that the bar path winds up being a straight diagonal line, right? I hear all this stuff on the internet about the bar path being like J-shaped and all this like random curvy nonsense, where there's none of that going on, all right? It's a straight bar path, starts up over your shoulder, right over the shoulder joint, the glenohumeral joint, like we talked about in the press, and then you're just gonna touch on your chest. If you're a guy, probably somewhere down below your nipples, right? It's as simple as that. Straight line, point A to point B. It's the easiest way to get there. All there is to it, all right? All right, to wrap up here, let's take a look at some Mona Lisa, some Starry Night. I'm talking the big picture, some considerations here, all right? So the bench press is not technical, like I said before. It's a very simple movement. It's kind of hard to mess up. For that reason, kind of ties into this second part here, as an advanced lifter, it's not necessarily the best idea to do just the standard bench press all the time, right? The bench responds very well to leverage, which is something to consider, right? So like the shorter you can make the range of motion, and the easiest way to do that is to get bigger, right? Best way to get bigger is to get stronger. And you can do that with more than just the standard bench press. So as a novice, all you need is the bench press, just run that way up, even as an intermediate, honestly. And then as you get more advanced, you can start implementing like different overloads, like pin bench or slingshot bench. You can do more like bodybuilding type stuff, like dumbbell bench. That kind of works well for a little bit. And then don't forget, you're not just trying to grow this way, you're also trying to grow back here as well. So running up your deadlift, your rack pulls, your rows, anything that's gonna make your back bigger is gonna help with your bench press as well. I think Dan Green, the powerlifter, he has like a quote, something about the bench press is like 90% bodybuilding. And so there's some merit to that, right? At some point, your effort is best spent trying to get larger and not practicing the bench press as often as you would another lift like the squat or the press, for example. And as far as programming at that point, advanced programming for the bench, I can make a whole other video on that. Maybe I will. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that. But yeah, that's it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, say something down below. Let me know what you think. Leave a like, share it with your friends. All right? Have a great day, pal.